wanted to basically open this talk with our title. We have Digital Citizenship, Campus Community, and Crowdsourcing Mobile Apps. We actually debated quite a long time whether to put it as mobile apps and then digital citizenship. So what you'll see is kind of, or see and hear, is kind of an equivalent talk. We'd like to spend quite a bit of time on mobile applications and then our methodology within the campus, which we put under the heading of crowdsourcing. One of the things I did want to note here, just to kind of set a little bit of a context going forward, is that at UCLA, one of the things we did, and a couple of you heard this yesterday, we reorganized my office and basically took it on as a more of a corporate CTO role. And what that's done is given us quite a bit of opportunity to now think about much more of the mission critical sorts of things. And in the context of this has given us more opportunity to think about mobile applications in a research and education sense, as well as administrative sense, and also then how do we work with the community. And specifically within the office, we've organized around two different areas. I'll introduce Rose in a moment. Rose Rocchio here is actually our Director of Academic Technology Services and responsible for the mobile web framework. And also Jackie Reynolds and Michelle Chen. We have an arm in the office which is Director of Community Partnerships. And so what we're in effect doing with this presentation is bringing those two aspects together. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to kind of frame this a little bit. Rose will jump in just a moment on the mobile web framework and the specifics of the mobility itself. But there's been a couple of essential things that we have experienced. So we just want to share a few slices of experience and also very interested in your reactions to some of these. The first thing is when we look at it from an IT standpoint, we really have to literally profess on the campus that what we're doing here is about the IT being used for useful purposes. It's about what the IT is being used for, what people are using it for, and it's not about what we're doing for the information technology. That is a very important profession from the IT staff in particular taking this forward, because the IT side of this, you really do have to give up some control. You have to give up control on the app side of things, and you have to recognize that the metric for this is actually rich apps coming in from all over the place on campus. And you need to get excited about our people really putting apps in here in a concerted way. One other thing I wanted to set the stage with is an observation that I've been making is as I go to more and more CIO conferences, the conversations actually become more and more similar. And one of the things I contend is that for all practical purposes, or to a first approximation, we're all putting in the same kinds of information technology, and we're starting to look very much the same campus by campus as we go around here. So the question that's really, I think, turning a corner and becoming a threshold sorts of question is really, in fact, how do we diversify ourselves, which means how do we bring our particular features of our campus or what we're trying to sell. So, I mean, in our case, in your case, the question is, what is the culture? What do you sell as a campus? What do you bring forward? And one of the things that we're seeing and arguing is that crowdsourcing using mobility is actually an extremely good way to diversify the features and the culture of your campus, bring those forward and bring those out into the IT that's showing up in the community. So basically, use the community to bring out your campus attributes. So this is the slide that I would like to set the stage to go into the mobile web framework. What we're really trying to do here is get the community involved with building applications. Of course, that's what crowdsourcing is about. But obviously the big difference here is this is not about a focus group and then some IT staff going in and building an app and then playing it back out to the focus group. It really is about putting an infrastructure together, saying, hey community, this is pretty easy to do. We really want to hear from you. We really want these apps to come forward, and that the decision on these apps will be the vote by the community. Which ones get used are the ones that stick, which ones that don't are the ones that fade away, and we from an IT staff are just putting the infrastructure in to facilitate that. So I'll circle back to that in a little bit, but what we'd like to do is switch gears. I'd like to turn it over to Rose, who has spearheaded our what we call our mobile web framework, which has expanded rather dramatically, not only within the campus, but across campuses. And think about this now from a crowdsourcing perspective, and then I'll circle back with how we then bring it back into the community and what we've been seeing with it. So, Rose.
Thanks, Jim. Okay. So the mobile web framework is based on 6 principles. The first is device agnostic. With a broad campus that is very large, we can't be buying one vendor's product for the entire campus, so we have to go with device agnostic. It's another piece of the framework or principle is graceful degradation, so that the higher end phones can perform at their highest level of functionality, but the lower end phones still get the functionality that they're capable of. So for instance, an image is compressed down for a lower level phone like an old Razr, while it would still be high definition at the level of an iPhone. Another thing that the framework enables for a campus is it allows you to bake in your branding into just the framework piece of what the applications will then look like, but then it allows the servers to be sprinkled across your campus. So for instance, UCLA Mobile is actually living on 10 or more servers across UCLA. And then another piece is that it's technology platform independent. So your Java developers, your PHP developers, your .NET developers can all leverage the framework because it's really just JavaScript and CSS3. And then finally, modern web standards. So the idea is that as HTML5 progresses, we will progress the framework with it so that it can be leveraged. And the idea there is that what you're doing is enabling your web developers across your institution and you're empowering them. So this, as Jim was mentioning, has become a popular toolkit for each campus in our system to start putting in place and letting their web developers leverage it. And so the first instance of crowdsourcing that sort of evolved was actually at Berkeley, and what they did was they did a technology seminar with the architect from UCLA, giving about a 3-hour session to about 50 or 60 developers, an afternoon on a Friday. That Saturday morning, my colleague, Bill Allison up at Berkeley, offered up a contest that said by Tuesday evening, if you can show that you learned, doesn't have to be production ready, but if you can show that you learned something in that seminar and do a proof of concept, submit it into, he gave a web address, and the prize was a iPad 2. So with only 2 business days, they got 10 apps submitted. And so then we followed suit after our conference. We did a similar thing. So I'll be showing that in a moment. But this is really to illustrate the fact that crowdsourcing is about a small kernel at the base, but then levels that build on top of it with your campus developers putting out. It's really just another distribution channel for content. So with your central developers putting the central services out with it, with your distributed developers doing their department work, using it. And then the exciting part, and I'll show you what's coming out right now with the work we've been doing with our researchers, as well as then Jim will show you some of the cool stuff we do with students. So that's really sort of the next generation, and that's where we think the real innovation, and when people start to use the framework, when the CS professors start to use it in their classes, I think it's going to be pretty neat. So, and this is just a little set of screenshots that were the result of the contest that we did after our competition, after the conference we did. We did our first conference last summer, and we brought people, that was just UC based. But this year we're going to do the conference, opening it up to anybody who's interested, and it'll be in September. And we'll give you the website at the end if you want to learn more about it. So out of the contest that we did after our conference competition, where we gave away, again, an iPad, but we didn't, otherwise there was no compensation for doing it. One of those apps did go production, and if you look on the left side of the screen, you're going to see what the psychology department app website used to look like before they put the framework in place. And then on the right, you'll see the app that they started as a result of that contest. And I'm going to flip through a few more views of what it looks like. But basically, of course there's governance, of course there's approval, and you have to get the chair of the department to agree that this is what they want. And so on. That's the production readying that they did after they built the app. But this is just showing you a few more of the screens. And this is live. It's at m.psych.ucla.edu if anyone wants to see it. And we should mention that UCLA Mobile is based on the mobile web framework. And like I said, depending on what type of device you have, if you look at the URL, you'll see that you're hopping across the different servers. Another app that came out of the contest was something that San Diego built, and it was a faculty expertise search app. And it was a pretty nice thing if you think about the fact that there's all kinds of other people on your campus, like your media people, that need to figure out quickly who to send somebody to when a reporter wants to know something or what have you. So this is something that one of the folks at San Diego built. Another thing to mention is it's not that we believe that native isn't important, but one of the things that you can do by lowering your cost of having one code base that works on all devices is you can take a native wrapper called an IU web view and put it around your website and then submit it into the store. And then one of the nice things is then you have the power of changing your website just like any other website anytime you want, and you don't have to resubmit. So it's one of the ways you can leverage your code right into the app stores. And Android, that's the case as well. So there's the UCLA app that's up on Android. And I'll mention that the other thing to mention with this screen is that the framework is capable of doing a grid view like what you see here. It's capable of doing the list view. The graceful degradation piece would be if something didn't allow for a touch screen, if a lower end phone didn't allow for a touch screen, you would see it in a list view so that somebody could use the up-down buttons. Okay, so this is part of the interesting piece that's just coming out. We've been working with a researcher who originally had built her code for Android. But the problem was, as she started to put it in the field with other mHealth researchers, was that they would have to go buy all of their patient study participants an Android device. On top of that, they would then have to go buy them a data plan, right? So then they had, let's say they had some other phone in their pocket, then they had to always remember to have the Android device. And the Android device was the piece that was actually giving them the little alarm to say, take your medicine, give yourself the shot, do this, do that, do the other. And it became expensive to write all of that into these grants. Not that it doesn't happen still, but the idea was that let's take that software, write it with an MWF client, and then it's going to be much more useful because anybody can just use their own device that they're already familiar with, that they already know how to use. So it cuts down training as well. So I'm going to just flip through a few of the screens here. And this is new stuff. It's not yet launched, but it's about to be, and it will all be available. Okay, so it's called Homage, and it's at homage.org, actually. But the code is not yet available, but it will be soon. So it's the idea. Let me go back a little bit. So somebody logs in. So they come to their study. They log in. Then they see what campaigns they might be involved in. Probably it's only one, but that's just showing you. And then, okay, so their piece of their study is a health survey. And so it asks the question, and they say, what did you drink so far today? And you pick what you did. And this is all web-based. And then it says, some extra questions. So just to show you there's a variety of different types of formats you can use. That's really all I'm doing here. As well as you can do things like geo-aware, like where was the person when they did this. So that's an interesting look into what we're doing with the framework. And one of the things that's interesting is that, yes, your students are likely to start to be having all the higher end phones. It depends on the community in your campus arena. But definitely there's a desire for the lower end phones to be functional for the types of research people are doing overseas. In Africa, 70% of the people who touch the internet use a mobile device, but it's not all going to be iPhone. So, and this is also just a little preview of something we're about to start, an alpha pilot on this coming spring quarter, which is kicking off as we speak. And what it is a mobile interactive polling tool that sits on top of the mobile web framework. And the idea there is that students, again, they don't want to have an extra device in their pocket, the clicker. What they want is just to use their phone to do the interaction in their classes. And it also is a cost savings for them. They don't have to pay a vendor, and you don't have to outfit your classrooms. And so the idea will be is that we'll be building modules, and we hope that other people will be building modules to integrate this into the LMSs. We're a Moodle campus, so we'll be doing that module, but we're hoping that others will be basically wrapping it into things like Sakai. But it also will be, I don't know how many people are familiar with IMS. Global Learning Consortium, because they are a standards body, and they've come out with something called Learning Tool Interoperability, and that is something that's a standard that then I believe it's all of the LMSs can consume tools that are LTI compatible. So it will be something that will be pretty much a drop-in to Blackboard or to any other LMS. And then a couple of the other use cases just to mention, if you happen to be doing a class where you've got a couple of different locations, so you've got the class that you're in front of, and then let's say we had another location in Japan or something, and they were piping in. I know the time difference wouldn't work, but in case it would. So I have a colleague in Kansas, Missouri, and he, not Kansas City, Missouri, right? Anyway, so he has a couple of instances where they teach across the system, and they have different classrooms all coming together for the class. It's synchronous, but it's remote. So the idea is that the students in the other locations have to use actually a web device to be part of that interactive polling, right? Because the radio is not going to go across the 30 miles. Okay. So just another thing to show you how some of the different groups on campus are using the framework. This is something that the Johnson Comprehensive Cancer Center has been working on and is about ready to launch. It's something that's basically informational, but it also has in it a giving piece. It has in it a way to search on clinical trials, and so it's something that it's actually making a lot of other people in the med center jealous. So it's spurring a lot of excitement around what the framework can do. So one of the things that is obvious is that as people are creating more apps, you're going to need an environment to allow them to share those apps. And so because your mobile presence will just be really the things that are specific to your campus, but the things that the students build, where are you going to put that, right? But what we're going to work on as our next release for the mobile web framework, for hopefully come out before the end of the year, will be a way to share these web-based apps locally across an institution's version of the framework, an instance. But then another phase beyond that will be to allow people who are using the framework sort of a way to share peer-to-peer. And finally, it'd be nice if we can get to a federated piece, because there are other frameworks out there, and once things are sort of put into an environment that's shareable across higher ed, it'll be really nice to be able to share. Sometimes you think of things like the smaller sort of niche learning communities like Scandinavian. We have a small department that's Scandinavian. But across the world, of course, there's more of those. And it'd be interesting if somebody builds a tool for them to be able to share it across the community a little more broadly. So, and with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jim to talk more about the crowdsourcing.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is now tie it back into the community side of the campus. But hopefully with what Rose was telling you, one of the key features here is that we've really exploited, really, if you will, a federated environment. It's independent of the data, the operating system in which the data exists, and the people. And then on the device side, it actually is device agnostic. As we're saying, it's very, very light. It's very easy to train. And so how can we start bringing this out to the community? And again, you saw a medical application and so forth. So we're really trying to now say, how do we tie this in, and what's the context of the community going forward? So just kind of re-emphasizing a little bit of what was said here. If we go back to UCLA, when we first opened this up just to our departments around the campus, both academic and administrative, we have data all over the campuses. It exists in all different forms. These are the units that actually step forward. They're developing their own apps. They are supporting their own apps. They're deciding whether these make sense for their particular audiences or what their operating situation is. And we went forward very, very quickly with these apps across the campus. And one of the things to point out here is each one of these boxes is not only an app, but it is a database, someplace else. We are not, from a central IT standpoint, trying to maintain data in some kind of centralized fashion. That is actually key. But this went forward very, very quickly. And like I said, those which stick, it's voting by the community. The department decides that makes sense. They gather information. If the community uses it, it stays. If it doesn't, they change it or it goes away. One of the most interesting things is Rose had alluded to, and this is a little more information on our past student contest, and we're doing these We're planning a next one here as we go along, but our last student contest, again, it had a training session. I believe there was 28 student groups showed up to the training session. That produced 8 different applications in a very short period of time. And what we then did, went through a contest or a judging of those particular applications that went into production. Obviously, the contest was for the iPad 2. That's all it takes, to generate the contest. But we actually ended up with a number of applications that we wanted to take forward. And one of the most interesting things here is not only the applications that are coming from the students, but we're getting some insights into what the students are thinking about. And that's actually been particularly powerful. And I did not predict this, but if you look at this, the winning application here is called Superfoods. And this is basically about putting information out to the students so they can eat healthy. They put the information out so they can look at that easy. But I was also struck, Bruin Freebies is about all the donut sales or different kinds of sales around the campus for various things, or things, free movies, free activities, and so forth. So the students are seeing where those are in an easy way. Hungry Hotspots, I mixed them up, is the one about where's the donut sales and the cookie sales. So we learned very, very quickly that food and freebies is high on the minds of the students. To elaborate a little bit more on what Rose was saying, we're seeing the mobile web framework community actually grow now among campuses. So from a University of California standpoint, we've actually adopted this pretty much as our standard across the campuses. We have 8 of the 10 UCs actually using this framework going forward. But it's also been interesting because other campuses have been approaching this and they're now using it, and it actually works very, very easy to move this particular framework into another campus situation. So University of Washington, Texas, and Santa Monica are already on, and we have several others that are coming forward. What's been interesting now is we've been trading apps already. It's easy to trade apps. So if Berkeley has an app for a particular, code for a particular app, we can bring that code in and use it, and we can start trading that. But what becomes more interesting is if we can actually start integrating the apps at a deeper level. So if a particular app tied in with a particular database exists at another campus, can we use that at UCLA or vice versa? And that's actually what we're down the path of and about to launch, as Rose was saying. But we're starting to see this sharing of the apps across the entire system going forward, as well as the other campuses. This is actually putting together a very rich set of apps very, very quickly. But I hope you get the point. One of the things here is that the number of apps that have come into play from the community has just been absolutely enormous. There's no way a central IT group could have put this many apps in place in this short period of time. Now, one of the things that's become very, very important to us is the context in which we do the crowdsourcing. So we're not just doing it in its own right. One of the things that we have spent a lot of time on the campus, and it actually came through our planning exercise, is a concept called digital citizenship. And in the shortest form, basically, we have a premise around a digital citizen, which is we need to get IT in the hands of each individual to do whatever they need to do and to do it best for whatever their professional interests are. But it also has a component of give back. In other words, they're part of a community, they have responsibilities in the community, and we actually take this premise forward that it makes sense for you to let us know how you're using technology effectively so others can learn. So that's actually our program under Digital Citizen. And one of the things we've been doing there is actually working with the community to help the community. So our campuses, the usual way is to run courses or focus groups or this or that. We've found it very, very exciting for people to not do those things, but actually move into more of a volunteer mode with the IT community helping the broader community. And so what each one of these, and I won't go through each one in detail, but each one of these is an event that takes place on the campus on a regular basis. IT staff from all over the campus come together on a volunteer basis and participate in this. So I'll just highlight a couple of those. Fact Tech is a particularly interesting one in which 7 or 8 IT staff will go to a particular academic department, and it's really set up to be speed dating for IT for faculty. And I was the first to say, I don't think this is going to work, but it works. We get a faculty sponsor, we get a an IT sponsor within the department set up 6 tables and put 6 different technologies. It could be our common learning environment, it could be Dropbox, it can be mobile apps, whatever it is, whatever is most important to that particular department. Set up 6 tables, let the faculty spend 5 minutes at each table, and we get a huge number of faculty coming in. And what they do is they leave with some awareness about this technology. They get follow-up questions, and we're starting to see the technology actually broaden across the campus. But we have a whole set of these kinds of programs going forward that are drawing upon what faculty are doing with the technology. We're now starting to take it in what faculty and what staff are doing with the mobile apps, bringing the awareness of the campus up, and this is actually generating more apps in the crowdsourcing sort of format. So this context of not just doing crowdsourcing for its own sake, but in a broader sense has become particularly important. And then let me just kind of close this notion of the IT staff volunteering. The interesting secret sauce on this is that the IT staff, are basically in their different departments. They actually relish getting out and being involved with the campus. That's one part. The other part is they relish being able to network with their other IT staff around the campus. They find that of great professional value. And then the third thing is their supervisors. We've had a lot of discussions around the campus. Their supervisors are actually finding the time put in on this volunteer exercise to be valuable because they're actually bringing real technology back into the particular units, and those are getting applied. And it's far more effective than trying to reproduce and learn these each time. So we started calling this volunteer group the IT Peace Corps on campus. And what it's translated into is that any given time we have about 100 IT staff across the campus putting in about an hour to a couple hours a week. If you add it up, we're at about 1,000, 1,200 hours a month. And those hours add up pretty quickly. And you start getting a lot of effectiveness from a community standpoint going forward than you can ever get from running individual classes. So my point here is to tie this back in with the mobility. This IT Peace Corps, this digital citizenship, the way the mobile web framework has been put up, the notion of crowdsourcing, when we bring all those together, it's just been enormous, the number of applications that are coming forward through these different mechanisms, and then the awareness that's going on the campus to actually begin using those. So with that, hope that gives you a flavor of what this is. Rose and I are happy to answer questions on this. Very much like your reactions on this because mobility is certainly a big area we're going into. And one other kind of end note for us is we're putting a new payroll system in, we're putting a new dossier system in, we're putting a new advanced system in. And when one thinks about all the mobility applications that are possible with those, these are the mechanisms by which we're tying into all of these new systems going forward as well. It provides us that background and mechanism to take those forward. So with that, thank you very much. And again, hope it gives you a little flavor for the kinds of things we're experiencing. So thank you. And right on time, good for 10, 15 minutes of questions or discussion, if there is any. Please.
Once you have the students develop the applications, who takes over ownership as far as who maintains it, or if there's any maintenance, what do you guys do from there?
Well, so far, that's something that we're trying to put in place. So that's part of the framework. The framework right now does not have the sharing environment yet, but that's coming, and so that'll be a place to put those. People who want to host it themselves, so for instance, like the psychology one, or if they're part of an organization, a student group or something along those lines, probably student affairs will be putting up a place for the student app. My thought would be they would probably be the ones putting a server for the student apps to be hosted. But right now the framework doesn't yet accommodate that sharing piece, but it's coming.
But if I can emphasize that, I mean, each unit that puts up the app is actually responsible for the app, and that's where it's getting maintained. So any of the administrative apps have a particular administrative unit that's supporting them, and then in our learning system, which we call Common Collaboration Learning Environment, we actually have a team of folks, and when those apps go through a prioritization, then those get maintained there. So each unit basically is responsible for the maintenance of the app, and then we will eventually have the store for the broader sharing of those. But the maintenance part is actually working out quite smoothly. smoothly right now.
Validation of the code?
I'm sorry.
Is there anyone validating the code?
Yeah, there will need to be, before we would put it in, there'll be a process to get it sort of put into the sharing environment. So, and that will be a sort of a code review. We're using GitHub, so there's a process that has been put in place by the team. The departmental ones, when they get added into the UCLA mobile, have to go through the code review.
Yes.
Do you have an approval group for the content? What apps can go out, what apps should not go?
We do. We have a steering committee for the campus. That's the steering committee of UCLA Mobile. And so it's the data stakeholders. And they agree, of course, the taxonomy is tricky. And it's something that a little bit is handled on your gateway site. We call it our main ucla.edu, our gateway site. But we work really closely with UCLA Communications, and clearly they're a big player on the, they're like our marketing group, on this steering committee. But absolutely, it's a process as the taxonomy evolves. One thing we learned with iTunes U was that you can come up with the most perfect taxonomy in the world, and yet that won't necessarily represent, because there's going to be people who aren't playing. It's a coalition of the willing, and sometimes there's pockets that just don't represent. So you kind of have to see who's at the table and then represent and let the taxonomy evolve.
One other point on this question is the process is not cumbersome. So you obviously have to have it. It's a steering committee, but the objective here is not to be a bottleneck or some cumbersome process on these. We actually let pretty much, if the application's not inappropriate and it meets the code validation, it can go in. And it's all about, as we were saying, about the community voting on the use of this and not some central group doing that. So it's more for validation and appropriateness, and that's actually pretty easy to manage. Yes?
Your opt polling tool is pretty interesting. You mentioned we were going to integrate it into your elements, which is Moodle. That plays to me since we have Moodle too.
Okay.
I was wondering if you've looked at the new Moodle 2.2 mobile capabilities.
Yeah, my understanding is that something that runs on jQuery Mobile. It's a little bit heavier, and it doesn't work on the lower end phones. So that's one thing. And I'm also not totally sure on how, across the themes in Moodle, how well things sort of translate and look. There's certain things that aren't in the Moodle theme that is mobile right now. And so one of the things that we're not totally sure on what we'll do is whether we'll do an MWF theme and then just contribute it for anybody who's Moodle and MWF. So for instance, Santa Barbara is also Moodle and also using the MWF, and so it's something that we would just put out there for Moodle users to have. And Opt as well. And Opt will also be LTI compatible, so you'll be able to drop it into Canvas, you could drop it into D2L, whatever.
One other comment on the lower end phones. The reason we're keeping it, we're like everyone else. 95% are on Droid or iPhone on the campus. But this medical side, especially we get into other countries, we're seeing the research side actually still needing to have the lower end phones, for gathering information and so forth. And so that's actually why we're carrying that one along. It's remained quite important from a research standpoint.